September 27, 2020, 6:02 a.m. Stepanakert, the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, nestled in the lap of the Caucasus Mountains. A fog-covered, quiet morning. Residents were just beginning to wake up from their sleep. Some were perhaps preparing breakfast. Others were getting ready to go to work. But they did not know that this morning would not be like other ordinary mornings of their lives. Just then, a fierce, terrifying roar tore through the sky. Before anyone could understand anything, the entire city shook with a massive explosion. Under the strikes of Azerbaijan's drones and artillery, multi-story buildings collapsed one after another in moments. The air became thick with the smell of burnt gunpowder and human screams. The sleep of the city dwellers was broken by the harsh sound of sirens. Terrified women and children began running for their lives towards underground bunkers. This was no ordinary border skirmish. This was the ultimate expression of anger, humiliation, and revenge accumulated over 30 long years. After the ceasefire of 1994, this was the largest conflict between the two countries. The war, which lasted for a continuous 44 days, redrew the map of the Caucasus. But why? Why do Armenia and Azerbaijan repeatedly engage in such bloody wars over a hilly settlement of just 4,400 kilometers? Why, after the fall of the Soviet Union, has this territory turned into one of the world's flashpoints, or a powder keg, where a peace treaty means only preparation for the next war? Is the ownership of this hill-surrounded settlement actually a card? Does it belong to Armenia or Azerbaijan? And how much is the geopolitics of superpowers responsible for this? We will try to find the answers to all these questions in today's episode of Adio Panto. The Caucasus region is geographically a junction of Asia and Europe. It is a strategic corridor that has been used as a battlefield for various empires for thousands of years. The Persian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire. These three superpowers of history have repeatedly engaged in conflict over the control of this region. And the common people here have become the victims of their power games. The word Nagorno comes from a Russian word which means mountainous or highland. And the word Karabakh originates from the Turkic and Persian languages, meaning black garden. That is, hidden within the name itself is a hint of the complex ethnic and linguistic conflict of this region. Geographically, Nagorno-Karabakh is located within the borders of Azerbaijan. But historically, the majority of the population here is ethnic Armenian, and by religion, they are Orthodox Christians. On the other hand, Azerbaijan is ethnically of Turkic descent and Shia Muslim. In terms of religion, language, and culture, there is a vast difference between the two nations. Armenians claim this region is part of their ancient Artsakh kingdom, which was under the rule of their kings 1,000 years ago. They present the 4th and 5th century ancient churches and monasteries scattered across the hills as living documents in support of their claim. According to them, this is the holy land of their ancestors, which slipped out of their hands due to the aggression of various foreign powers. They believe that Azerbaijanis came here much later and forcibly occupied their land. It can be said that this Karabakh is the heart of Armenian nationalism. On the other hand, Azerbaijan's claim is no less strong. According to them, Karabakh is an inseparable part of their historical and geographic integrity. They believe that due to wars at various times and through migration during the Russian rule, the number of Armenians increased here. But the true owners of the land are the Azerbaijanis. To them, Karabakh is not just a territory, but a significant center of their cultural heritage. Specifically, the city of Shusha is known as the cradle of Azerbaijani culture, where many of their poets, writers, and musicians were born. Amidst these counterclaims, in the 19th century, Tsarist Russia appeared on the scene in this region. Through the wars of 1813 and 1828, they took control of this region from Persia. During the Tsar's rule, various regions were divided for administrative convenience, but no sincere effort was made to resolve ethnic divisions. Rather, the Tsarist rulers used that old colonial strategy of inciting one nation against another to solidify their own power. As a result, there was no sign of ethnic hatred decreasing. After the fall of the Ottoman and Russian empires during the First World War, a chaotic situation arose in this region. In 1918, both Armenia and Azerbaijan declared independence. And immediately after gaining independence, a terrible bloody war began between the two countries over the control of Karabakh. Villages were burned down, and ordinary people were killed. The Caucasus witnessed an ultimate form of violence. Before the tremors of that war could fade, in 1920, the Bolsheviks appeared on the scene in the Caucasus. The entire region trembled under the footsteps of the Soviet Red Army. Unable to stand against their massive power, both Armenia and Azerbaijan were forced to sacrifice their independence. The two countries were forcibly included in the Soviet Union. Initially, it seemed that everyone would unite under the umbrella of socialism, forgetting ethnic differences. Because in socialism, class struggle is greater than race or religion. But in reality, the exact opposite happened. 1921. Power in the Soviet Union was then increasingly being concentrated in the hands of the Bolshevik Party. In a crucial meeting to determine the fate of the Caucasus sat Joseph Stalin, the Soviet Union's Commissioner for Nationalities. A single stroke of his pen determined the future of millions of people in this region, which ultimately sowed the main seeds of today's conflict. Initially, the Bolsheviks promised that Nagorno-Karabakh would be handed over to Armenia. The logic behind this was very clear. More than 90% of the population there was ethnic Armenian. Geographically and culturally, they had a deep connection with Yerevan. Armenian Bolshevik leaders also hoped that justice would be served. But in the complex equations of geopolitics, interest became greater than justice. Turkey's then leader Mustafa Kemal Atatürk wanted to build good relations with the Bolsheviks. On the other hand, the Soviet Union also wanted to keep Turkey within its sphere of influence. Considering Turkey's objection and the strategic importance of Azerbaijan's oil-rich Baku region, Stalin changed his decision. In 1923, through a controversial decision, Nagorno-Karabakh was included in the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic as an autonomous oblast or region. This was a huge blow to the Armenians. Geographically, this region was not isolated from Armenia, but administratively, it was put inside the belly of Azerbaijan, and strategic areas like the Lachin Corridor were kept under Azerbaijani control to isolate it from Armenia. Stalin's policy was named divide and rule. He knew that if a disputed region was kept alive between two neighbors, they would always be terrified of each other and would look to Moscow for security. No one could ignore Moscow's control to become independent or powerful if they wanted to. During the Soviet rule, for almost 7 decades, this anger burned like fire hidden under ashes. Outwardly, it seemed everything was calm. Soviet propaganda showed people of different nations living in happiness and peace. But internally, complaints of discrimination were rampant. The Armenians of Karabakh complained that the Azerbaijan government was suppressing their culture and language and was deliberately keeping this region economically backward. They further alleged that the Baku government was encouraging Azerbaijani settlement in this region. Although there were occasional small protests, they could not go very far under Moscow's strict rule. No one dared to speak out because the consequence would be either a Siberian labor camp or the death penalty. But in the late 1980s, when Mikhail Gorbachev came to power, the situation began to change. Gorbachev announced the policies of glasnost, or open discussion, and perestroika, or restructuring. People's freedom of speech increased slightly. And taking that opportunity, the long-accumulated anger burst out like a lava stream from a volcano. In 1988, the regional legislature of Nagorno-Karabakh passed a historic resolution where they announced their secession from Azerbaijan to join Armenia. This proposal was a direct blow to Azerbaijan's sovereignty. The government and people of Azerbaijan could not accept this in any way. Protests, strikes, and clashes began. Riots spread across various cities in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Specifically, the attacks on Armenians in Sumgait and Baku in Azerbaijan became known as pogroms, or ethnic riots. Similarly, thousands of Azerbaijanis were expelled from their homes and lands in Armenia. Neighbors who had lived side by side for so long, who used to visit each other's homes, turned into enemies of each other's lives and property overnight. Killings took place everywhere, on trains, buses, and streets. The Soviet army tried to bring the situation under control, but it was of no use. In fact, the massive Soviet Union was then facing its own collapse. So, they had neither the capability nor the will to extinguish this fire in the Caucasus. On December 25, 1991, the red flag bearing the hammer and sickle was lowered from the Kremlin. The Soviet Union formally broke apart into pieces. One of the massive superpowers of the 20th century was wiped off the map. With this collapse, both Armenia and Azerbaijan gained full independence. And immediately after gaining independence, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh turned into a full-scale war. It was no longer just internal riots or protests. It became a total war between two independent sovereign states. The Armenian separatists of Nagorno-Karabakh declared war against the Azerbaijani army with direct military and economic support from the Armenian government. On the battlefield, Armenia was in a quite advantageous position because they had the unspoken support of Russia. Moreover, being a mountainous area, the local Armenians could utilize the advantages of guerrilla warfare. Azerbaijan's army was not yet well organized, and due to political instability, they repeatedly failed on the battlefield. In this war, which lasted from 1992 to 1994, about 30,000 people were killed, a large portion of whom were civilians. More than 1 million people were displaced. Specifically, the massacre that took place in the town of Khojaly on February 26, 1992, was a black chapter in history. According to the Azerbaijani government's version, on that night, Armenian forces surrounded the town of Khojaly and ruthlessly killed hundreds of innocent Azerbaijani women, children, and the elderly as they tried to flee. The images of corpses lying on the snow still give birth to deep wounds and hatred in the minds of the Azerbaijani people. Armenia, of course, denies responsibility for this massacre, repeatedly claiming it was an unintended event of war. At one stage of the war, Armenian forces not only occupied Nagorno-Karabakh, but also captured 7 districts of Azerbaijan surrounding Karabakh, including Agdam, Fuzuli, and Jabrayil. These districts were mainly Azerbaijani populated and outside of Karabakh. Armenia's argument was that it was necessary to create a buffer zone or security ring to protect Karabakh from Azerbaijan's artillery attacks. But in the eyes of the international community, this was direct aggression and occupation. In 1994, a ceasefire agreement was signed through Russian mediation, known as the Bishkek Protocol. Although major bloodshed stopped through this agreement, there was no permanent solution to the problem. Nagorno-Karabakh and huge surrounding areas remained under Armenian control. They declared an independent state there named the Republic of Artsakh. Their own government, army, flag, and currency were also introduced. But the reality is that the United Nations or no country in the world, not even Armenia itself, formally recognized this state. Internationally, it remained recognized as part of Azerbaijan. As a result, for the last 26 years, this region was a field of a frozen conflict, where there is no peace, yet no full-scale war either. Soldiers from both countries would sit in trenches dug at the border, pointing guns at each other. Young soldiers would often lose their lives to sniper bullets, and millions of displaced Azerbaijanis would count the days, dreaming of returning to their lost homes. On the other hand, Armenians thought they had protected their land by winning the war, and that this would be permanent. But they did not realize that time does not always stay the same, and a humiliated enemy never sleeps. From 1994 to 2020, in these long 26 years, there was a radical change in the geopolitics, economy, and power equations of the Caucasus, which Armenia perhaps could not fully comprehend even then. Azerbaijan became economically massively powerful by utilizing their huge oil and gas resources. By exporting black gold, or oil and natural gas extracted from the bottom of the Caspian Sea to Europe through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, they were earning billions of dollars. They spent a huge portion of this money on modernizing and strengthening their military forces. President Ilham Aliyev was proceeding with a long-term plan with a very cool head. He formed a military alliance with Turkey and established strategic relations with Israel. The world-famous Bayraktar TB2 drones were purchased from Turkey, which are capable of turning the tide of modern warfare. Harop kamikaze drones and long-range missiles were brought from Israel. They also bought plenty of modern weapons from Russia. Azerbaijan's goal was one: to recover their lost territory at any cost. On the other hand, Armenia was economically weak and largely stagnant. Their military force was mainly dependent on old Soviet-era weapons. Their tanks, artillery, and radar systems were outdated. They thought that by utilizing their military agreement with Russia and the difficult mountainous geographic advantage of Karabakh, they could easily hold off Azerbaijan. They further believed that the international community, or Russia, would intervene if war started. This overconfidence became their undoing. In July 2020, there was a minor skirmish at the border between the two sides, in which a high-ranking Major General of Azerbaijan was killed. This incident angered the people of Azerbaijan. Thousands of people took to the streets of Baku, chanting slogans demanding war. The government realized that there was no more time to wait. Finally, on September 27, 2020, Azerbaijan started a total operation. This war was completely different from the war of the 1990s. It was a war dependent on 21st century modern technology. Military experts are calling it drone war. From the very first day of the war, Azerbaijan disabled Armenia's air defense systems with their Bayraktar drones. Then, hundreds of Armenia's tanks, artillery, and bunkers were destroyed from the sky with precise aim. Armenian soldiers sitting in mountain bunkers could not even understand where death was descending from. In this 44-day war, Azerbaijan recaptured the districts of Jabrail, Fuzuli, Zangilan, and Kubadli one by one. Armenian forces were forced to retreat. The final turn of the war came when Azerbaijan's special forces, crossing difficult mountains and forests, captured the most strategically important city and cultural capital of Karabakh, Shusha, known to Armenians as Shushi. The city of Shusha is located on a high mountain, and from here, the capital of Karabakh, Stepanakert, can be controlled. With the fall of Shusha, Armenia's morale completely broke. They realized that if they continued the war, the entire Karabakh would slip out of their hands and thousands of soldiers would die. On November 9, 2020, through the mediation of Russian President Vladimir Putin, another ceasefire agreement was signed. However, the terms of this agreement were completely different. It was effectively Armenia's surrender. According to the agreement, Armenia had to hand over all occupied districts to Azerbaijan to maintain peace in the part of Nagorno-Karabakh that was still under Armenian control, and to ensure the security of the Lachin corridor. About 2,000 Russian peacekeeping troops were deployed. Victory celebrations were held in Azerbaijan, while a shadow of grief descended upon Armenia. After the 2020 war, it seemed the situation would calm down somewhat, and perhaps a diplomatic solution would be found. But Azerbaijan's ultimate goal was the complete eviction of Armenian separatists from Karabakh and the establishment of Baku's full sovereignty. They were not willing to accept another government or the presence of foreign troops within their territory in any way. From December 2022, Azerbaijan blockaded the Lachin corridor. This blockade, which started in the name of an environmentalist movement, later turned into a government checkpoint. This corridor was the only road connecting Karabakh with Armenia. As a result, about 120,000 Armenians inside Karabakh fell into a severe crisis of food, medicine, fuel, and daily necessities. Supermarket shelves became empty. Medical treatment in hospitals was hampered due to a lack of medicine. The besieged settlement reached the brink of a humanitarian disaster. Although Armenia appealed to the international community for help, no effective steps were seen. Russia was then fully busy with the Ukraine war, so their attention and influence in the Caucasus had decreased dramatically. Moreover, Russia's commercial and strategic relationship with Azerbaijan had become important. As a result, Russian peacekeepers played the role of silent spectators. Finally, on September 19, 2023, Azerbaijan started a so-called anti-terror operation. Their allegation was that Armenian separatists were killing Azerbaijani police and civilians with landmines. In just this 24-hour lightning operation, the Armenian separatist forces in Karabakh collapsed completely. Their ammunition ran out, and there was no hope of receiving outside help. Forced by circumstances, on September 20th, they announced their surrender. Accepting Azerbaijan's conditions, they surrendered their weapons, and their long-cherished dream, the Republic of Artsakh, was declared dissolved. A decree was issued that from January 1st, 2024, this republic would no longer exist. Through this, the fall of a self-proclaimed state that had lasted for more than 3 decades occurred. Out of fear and panic, ethnic Armenians began leaving Karabakh. They feared that Azerbaijanis might take revenge on them, or that they might become victims of ethnic cleansing. Within just a few days, more than 100,000 Armenians fled to Armenia, leaving behind their homes, lands, and even livestock. Long lines of cars, trucks filled with furniture, and the look of uncertainty on people's faces. These scenes appeared to the world's conscience as a humanitarian tragedy. A 1,000-year-old settlement, where church bells once rang and children's laughter existed, turned into a desolate ghost town in moments. Today, Nagorno-Karabakh is under Azerbaijan's full control. Victory flags may be flying on the streets of Baku. President Aliyev may have fulfilled his father's dream. By recovering the lost part of the map, Azerbaijan has brought back its national pride. But will the blood stains on the mountains and people's sighs be wiped away so easily? Is there any possibility that the more than 100,000 Armenians who fled leaving their homes, ancestors' graves, and childhood memories will return? The Azerbaijan government has repeatedly promised that Armenian citizens will be given full rights and integrated into their society. But is it possible to wipe away the hatred, mistrust, and wounds of war accumulated over 30 long years in one day? Where the children of the two countries have grown up thinking of each other as enemies, Is coexistence really realistic? History has repeatedly shown us that while territory can be conquered by force of arms, winning people's hearts is difficult. The international community, especially France, Russia, and the United States, cannot avoid responsibility for the failure of the time wasting they did in the name of peace talks for 3 long decades. They wanted to maintain the status quo, but they did not touch the root of the problem. Will peace truly return to this hilly settlement in the Caucasus, or is the silence just a forecast of a bigger coming storm? Will this victory of Azerbaijan give birth to a new conflict in the future? Or will the two nations find a way to live anew by forgetting their bitter past? Perhaps only time can give that answer.